ahead and um hi everyone, or assalamu alaikum if it counts. My name is Sijil. I'm with Democratic Socialists of America. We are the ones hosting this panel. DSA is a democratic socialist organization in the United States. We have many national bodies, including the International Committee, which is the one hosting this panel, particularly our Asia and Oceania subcommittee. We wanted to have a discussion regarding the left in Pakistan and how it's doing today. So we have three lovely guests who have taken the time to speak with us today. So I would like to give each of you a chance to introduce yourselves. If you could just tell us a bit about yourself, highlight you tell us a bit about your party, highlight something that's recently been going on with your party, or what your main goal has been lately, maybe. Mohibba, do you want to start?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Mohibba Ahmed, and I've been a member of Haqooq-e-Khalq Party from the very beginning. At the moment, I'm based in New York City, and I'm working as an organizer at Drum, New York City, and working with the Pakistani working class here in New York City. And a little bit about Haqooq-e-Khalq Party. Haqooq-e-Khalq Party is a left-wing political party in Pakistan that aims for grassroots base building with the working class people. And the party has been actively working in working class areas of several industrial cities in Punjab to build the leadership and power of the working class. And right now it has particular focus on organizing the factory workers. And I'll stop here and I'll pass it to Zahid Ali.
Hi everyone, my name is Zahid Ali. I'm also a member of Haqooq-e-Khalq Party since 2016. I'm also doing my PhD from Rice University, but currently I'm in Pakistan. And as Mohibba mentioned, we are a very new party. We formed this party 4 or 5 years ago. Before that, we were also at the forefronts of a national student movement in Pakistan. And we have also been part of a progressive student collective and Khalq Youth Front, which are also associated with the Haqooq-e-Khalq Party.
My name is Asim Sajjad. I'm associated with the Awami Workers Party, which is very similar to the HKP, is a left-wing political party, which is a little bit older, but we work in very similar contexts, both in urban Pakistan and in some areas of Sindh and Khyber Pakhtunkhwa as well. We are broadly committed to socialist principles, internationalist principles. We are very closely affiliated with national rights movements, which in Pakistan means ethnic national rights, especially ethnic minorities like the Baloch and Pashtun and Sindhi national movements. We're also closely affiliated with burgeoning emergent feminist movement. I'll stop there. And personally, I'm an academic. I teach at a university in Islamabad called Quaid-e-Azam University. And that's it. We can carry on later.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So I kind of wanted to start with a quick, maybe if y'all could maybe give us a bit of a quick refresher on not just the history of Pakistan, but mostly like emphasizing on the recent last couple of years with the ouster of Imran Khan and the transitionary government and the elections last year. Anyone can jump in on this one.
Okay, sure. I'll get us started. As you noted, and I think it's garnered a lot of comment in the U.S. within progressive circles as well. Imran Khan was ousted now more than 2 years ago, May 2022. And since there's been quite a what I believe to be, or what I think our party understands to be, a significant rupture within sort of Pakistan's traditional ruling class circles, which is front and center of which is the military. Just 3 or 4 days ago, the head of the ISI, which is Pakistan's omnipotent, preeminent spy agency, the ex-head of the ISI, who was known to be a close affiliate of Imran, was court-martialed, which is, as public events go in Pakistan, is quite a sensational public event, because it's rare for the military to come down on one of its own like that. So, that's generated a lot of comment, and I think a lot of also to think about in social and class terms. I think us on the left, we're grappling with the fact that there is a large number of young, sort of working, both white and blue collar people in Pakistan. Pakistan is a very young country, mind you, like the rest of South Asia, that support Imran Khan. And he has a fairly standard, sort of very populist right wing, on the one hand, anti-Western, anti-elite, so to speak. So that's the broad context within which we're operating right now.
Mohiba and Zahid, I'm curious to know if you all have any thing to add that you feel that our viewers or our listeners should know about.
Yeah, the ouster of Imran Khan has been a news in Pakistan since the last 2 years. It's part of the everyday news cycle, 24/7. In some ways, every national mainstream news is moving around this issue of Imran Khan's ouster and what happened after his government was toppled through a non-confidence vote of no confidence motion. But right now, PTI is the most popular political party in Pakistan, unfortunately, because of the right-wing popular rhetoric that Comrade Asim also mentioned earlier. And the arrest of former DG ISI is quite a sensation since the past 2 days. But right now, there is a rift between different state institutions. The judiciary is on the side, in some ways, on the side of Imran Khan and his party, but the new leadership of Pakistan military is trying to sustain their power, because they think if Imran Khan comes to power, it would not be good for the current leadership of the military. He will install his own military leadership, and he'll also do a severe crackdown on other mainstream political opponents. So that's the situation right now regarding Imran Khan and PTI.
Yeah, and I would just add here for context that to look at the political landscape of Pakistan, the military has always tried to destabilize civilian governments in Pakistan, and one of the things to know is that since Pakistan's inception in 1947, we've had 29 prime ministers, but none of them have completed their full term. And that's the same kind of situation that happened with Imran Khan as well.
Right. So how should we think of the current government that's in power in terms of its democratic legitimacy, considering this involvement of the military and how it relates to the military right now?
Yes, we'll keep going in order. I don't mind if we change it up. So I'll just start. Yeah, I mean, democratic legitimacy are 2 words that really should not even be associated with the present regime. I mean, so if Imran Khan is sort of the new emergent face of which is the same problem with liberal democracy everywhere, that the liberal center creates the conditions for the right to thrive. So Imran Khan was a creation, on the one hand, of deliberate military, as Mohiba just pointed out, the deliberate military manipulation of the political process, but also the fact that the dominant established parties, and 2 of them should be named explicitly, the Pakistan Muslim League and the Pakistan People's Party, which have intermittent sort of exchanged terms in government for the last 30 years. Also, the fact that these 2 have failed miserably, and every time they're out of power, wax lyrical about how military rule and all of the other excesses associated with Pakistan's class project have to be opposed, but then they come back into power, as they did after May or April 2022, riding on the back of the military. So they have zero legitimacy. They are begging for each dollar they can from the IMF and also from other bilateral donors. And in the last 2 years, 2.5 years, basically Imran's graph has just risen further because there's a systematic decline in working people's living standards. There's relentless inflation, which of course is a global phenomenon, but Pakistan has seen like double digits, sometimes up to 30% inflation for the best part of 2 years. Unemployment figures aren't even published because they're probably so high that they're ashamed to do so. And then there's a host of unrest in the ethnic peripheries, which are just pillaged and subject to serious state repression. So this is the democratic government that's doing all of this.
Yeah, I agree. Not only they don't have any democratic legitimacy, but there is a deep hatred in like very large portion of Pakistani society right now against not only the military, but also these other two parties, Muslim League Nawaz and Pakistan People's Party. Because before, when Imran Khan was in government, specifically Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, they raised these slogans that military should stay in its constitutional limits, there should be respect for people's vote and people's mandate. But then they made the deal with the military, and when they came to power, they did the repression not only on people associated with Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf or PTI, but also on lawyers, on students, and the oppression in ethnic peripheries has also increased since the last 2-3 years. It was always there due to this huge context of war on terror and the dollar jihad that Pakistan did in the 80s and 90s. But right now, the situation is really bad, not only economically, but also fundamental rights are being curbed. There is no freedom of press or association or anything like that. So there is deep hatred towards these political parties. And the fear is if Imran Khan now comes to power with this huge popularity wave, there is a big chance of authoritarian or fascist tendencies when he's in the government, which will be bad for overall for Pakistani society.
And I think Asim and Zahid covered all on this question, so nothing more to add on this.
All right, yeah. No need to if you don't have an answer or if you don't feel the need to chime in, there's no pressure really. So I guess I was wondering what so the current government, how does this government relate to the regional players such as Iran, China, India, as well as the international players like the US, as Asim mentioned, the IMF. There's a lot of financial institutions at play here that are kind of have US power. So I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on how does that relate with all these heavy hitters.
Since you missed the last one.
Sure. I think that with regards to the regional players, I think that with India, the situation and the relationship with Pakistan has been increasingly on the decline, and also that might have to do with the rising fascism in India. And there doesn't seem to be any indication of improvement in the bilateral relationship with India. With China, definitely Pakistan has a cordial relationship, but the Pakistani states dealing on the CPEC and the operation of CPEC, the China-Pakistan economic corridor has been questionable since there was a lot of control that China had on the development of the project. And we've been seeing in the past few years, especially, there has been a rise in militant organizations attacking Chinese nationals with the CPEC operations as well. And China now wants guarantees from Pakistan that it would be safe to continue with this project in Pakistan. So there is this tension there. But I think that all in all, I would say that Pakistan at the moment is most dependent on the IMF, and because of the IMF, we see at the moment the current rise in inflation has been really, really visible, because IMF's first condition is no subsidizing for health, electricity, and the inflation has been a direct consequence of that. So I think I'll stop here, but if other people want to add on it.
Not really. I mean, I think that, yeah, certainly Pakistan is a staging ground, always has been a staging ground for geopolitical rivalry. I think there's some context, historical context. I mean, it was a big frontline state during the Cold War because of the Soviet Union and China both being very close by. And then there's this entire jihad project, which was about, staving off Soviet power and influence. So that hasn't changed. So the Pakistani state and the military in particular sort of leverages its geographical position for reps. It's just that this policy is increasingly unable to meet the needs, like both formal exchequers bankrupt, and then you have this huge growing young population which has no jobs. So yeah, so I mean, the banking on IMF on the one hand, and then sometimes China, and then the Gulf kingdoms. I mean, it's just like one handout to the next. And unfortunately, I mean, there's also, like there has been in the past, it's quite clear that a lot of this geopolitical rivalry translates into what is Cold Wars for big powers becomes a hot war, especially in the Baloch and Pashtun peripheries. So it's a bad situation, and especially in the absence of a substantial organized left, right, that can sort of take all of this in a clear anti-imperialist direction, and because we struggle to be bigger than what we are. I think that's that creates the conditions for someone like an Imran to thrive on the basis of anti-Western rather than more substantial anti-imperialist sentiment.
Yeah, I agree. The Pakistani state, which is right now essentially the military leadership, because as we said earlier, the democratic government is just a puppet government. Right now, they are trying to play their old game, which is like they're trying to play on both sides of the pitch. They are also trying to appease America and also trying to meet the conditionalities of IMF loans at the one hand. And on the other hand, they're also trying to appease China because they want Chinese investment, either if it is in the shape of China-Pakistan Economic Corridor or other various projects that China have in Pakistan. But apparently, the IMF has, or the US or IMF has said to Pakistan that you have to guarantee us before taking this next installment that these loans will not be paid to pay back the Chinese interests or Chinese loans. So there is this conflict going on, which many on the international front are calling a new global Cold War, and Pakistan is also being pushed into it. And with the absence of a legitimate democratic government or a mass left movement or left or organized left in Pakistan, the military and essentially the technocrats, which are more inclined towards the US camp, they are running the show right now. So Pakistan right now is more on the side of US, but it can't say it openly because it also needs Chinese investments. So they are trying to play this double game, but I think China and US know by now how Pakistan do these kind of things.
Yeah, I actually saw someone mention something, which is a good point, that I was curious I wanted to know if y'all could talk a bit more about Imran Khan from two angles. One, to give some context and history on who he is for folks who might not be familiar with him, as well as maybe if you could explain the left's perspective on Imran Khan and why folks on the left might not share the same popular sentiment that he seems to have among many of Pakistani and Pakistani American diaspora as well.
Let's start. Yeah, Imran Khan is a sort of a classic 21st century celebrity politician who sort of initial appeal came because he was a cricketing World Cup captain, winning captain. And also, mind you, a very suave, playboy-like figure, right? So he had this appeal as a celebrity, literally as a celebrity. And he toiled with his party, which was called the Tehreek-e-Insaf from the beginning, for 20 years around a very standard, typical liberal middle class sort of anti-corruption agenda, that the corrupt political elite, the sort of empty signifier of a corrupt political elite, needs to be replaced. I'm an outsider. I've done great charity work. I've won a World Cup for Pakistan. And so we have this penchant, at least our educated sort of segments have had this penchant for these sorts of apolitical, technocratic, sort of magic wand. Let's fix it all by kicking out all the politicians, as Mohiba pointed out, since the very beginning, really since the colonial period. I mean, these are sort of lineages of political sort of ideology since that time. And so, yeah, he was sort of very thrust suddenly into power, into a very power wielding position in 2011 with this very prominent jalsa in Lahore. And then since then, I mean, the evidence is quite clear that he has enjoyed the support of the military. On the other hand, it is also true that both because of that support and having been in government since 2013, first in the province of KP and then 2018 in the center, both because of that and otherwise, he has garnered a lot of support amongst young people. He uses digital technologies, far more superior sort of use of these technologies, like all of these, like a Modi or a Trump or, all of these guys. And now it's reached a point where socially, as Zahid pointed out, there's very, I mean, it would be a foolish person, and us on the left, if we're serious about anything, to claim that it's just the military that backs him. In fact, he's had a rupture with at least the present military leadership, if not the entire military leadership. He's very popular, mind you, with the military rank and file, even. There is a broad swathe of, especially in Punjab and parts of Pakhtunkhwa and urban centers. Now, it's important to bear in mind, Pakistani politics is very, very divided in terms of regional and ethnic dimensions. So he has nominal support in places like Balochistan or amongst ethnic Sindhi populations, for instance, to take an example. But there's a majority of Pakistanis, young Pakistanis, who certainly are taken in by his claims of being an outsider, and he's always better off in the opposition, frankly, in the sense that that sort of stokes fire to that notion that there is this corrupt political elite. And the last thing I would say is, I think because of this rupture, however deep that rupture is, for the first time, you have a large segment of young people who are his supporters, who were previously very pro-military, have actually started to take on quite explicitly. Now, if they're anti-military positions, the problem is that they tend to focus on individual sort of generals and sort of more like the sensational sort of who is in power rather than sort of more broad-based structural sort of features of Pakistan's political economy, whether it be military control over the economy or, sort of our larger class and other forms of power. But yeah, I mean, the left take is that we have to try and win over that segment of the young population that is drawn to that rhetoric, and that's no easy task. But that's really the challenge we face.
Yeah, as Comrade Asim said, he's a celebrity turned politician. I mean, for the longest time, he formed his party, PTI, in the 90s, but for 2 decades, the party was nowhere in the mainstream political arena. But then suddenly in 2010, 2011, there were huge jalsas, one in Lahore, then in other parts of Punjab, and then one in Karachi. And it unfolded later on that it was all due to military's support, whether it is in the media or in the judiciary or in the newspapers. Everywhere the military started to propagate this new message of Imran Khan, which was that these 2 political parties, they have taken their turns, and they're also corrupt. All their wealth is in offshore companies in other countries. And I am here, I don't have any interest in foreign countries, and I am like upright person. And you haven't tried me yet and my party, and this is now my turn to do governance, and I'll reform governance system in Pakistan. So this was the initial rhetoric. The 2018 election that PTI won on a national scale, they were also not democratically legitimate elections. There were like thousands of questions. There were rigging allegations. There were the candidates were kidnapped. Their nomination papers weren't filed. All of these similar kind of things that are happening now, they also happened in 2018, but on a smaller scale. But when after the vote of no confidence against Imran Khan, and I'll also like to talk about when Imran Khan was in his last months of government in 2022, PTI and Imran Khan, their popularity was around like 4% or 5%. So they were on their lowest popularity also. But with this vote of no confidence, especially Imran Khan and his party, they made this whole fictitious narrative that number one, America toppled our government. Number two, military leadership also listened to America and they did a coup against me and they bought off the political leadership. So there is this whole rhetoric, there isn't any content or substantiation in it, but it's just a rhetoric that they made into a narrative that they are somehow anti-imperialist or anti-American, and it is against Pakistan's national sovereignty that a sitting prime minister should be ousted like this on a low-level diplomat, American diplomat. So they made this whole kind of narrative, and people actually listened to it because he appeared on TV for like one whole year every day. And he just for 15 minutes, he over and over iterated the same thing. And the genuine popularity of Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf and Imran Khan, it actually came after the vote of no confidence in like 2022. And we are obviously having an issue on how to win over this large segment of youth population, which is attracted to Pakistan Tehreek-e-Insaf. But we also are trying to build an alternative narrative that on most of the policies, there is no difference between military leadership or Pakistan Muslim League Nawaz, Pakistan People's Party, or PTI. They all want to go to the IMF. They all want to privatize different sectors. They all want to cut social spending and development spending. So economic policies, social policies, they are on similar page on all of these policies. So it's just a fictitious rhetoric or narrative, which is right-wing popular narrative that we have to counter. And for that, we are also thinking about forming a united front or a popular front. There are also very initial ongoing discussions maybe about forming a one party instead of so many different left parties. So this is how we think about PTI and the Imran Khan problem, right?
To hear Zahid say that last point, didn't realize that those discussions had reached that point, but I'm very happy to hear that.
Yeah, that's super exciting. Moheba, did you have any thoughts? I want to give you a chance to.
Yes, sure. So I also think what Asim and Zahid said, I have the same assessments that had Imran Khan been, led to complete his 5-year term, he might not have come out as popular as he became because of his ousting. And the left basically has this point of view. And also, Imran Khan is really popular with the diaspora as well. And I've been working with the working class diaspora, and really, he has that, he has that heroism to him that, everybody wants to just agree with whatever it is that he's saying. And especially after his anti-imperial stance, like everybody is a little confused. Like he is anti-imperial, then why is the left not supporting him exactly? But you have to see how he came to power. And like as Zahid mentioned and Asim mentioned, like his, coming to power was also at the back of the military, and then him opposing the military and just like individuals in the military just makes it clear that he's not against the institution. He's just trying to get into power again. And that's one of the reasons why he's taking this anti-military stance. But he has been really successful with it. And that's something that was a rupture, definitely, like, that it resonated with the people for the first time, because the military has had that kind of popularity. But now Imran Khan has come up against the military to that extent. So yeah, because he does not, like, he recognizes, like, he has these really big solutions, like, remove corruption and everything would be okay, or remove this and remove that, but he's not really have like grounded assessment of what the problems really are. And he's just trying to give solutions to the problems that aren't grounded in reality. And so that's why the left thinks that, he's not a leader as, the people think that he is. He's not as anti-imperial, he's not anti-military, because he's not giving us any structural solutions to the problem that are there. So yeah, just wanted to put that there. And yeah.
Thank you so much. You actually put that a lot better than I have when I've been dealing with some family members on this discussion. So we do have the Q&A option for folks to drop questions, and generally we're looking to answer some of them at the end, but as I see some good ones pop up, I might just throw them in there in the middle. But there's a really good one that came in about asking, and I think this is I was wondering if we could talk about whether or not Imran Khan's story is indicative of this general point. But somebody asked, what is the level of accountability for leaders and how is it implemented? And I would maybe ask you to talk about historically how it's supposed to, and maybe whether or not it played out this way, or if it was different with regards to Imran Khan.
There is no accountability for leaders if you wear a uniform. That's the first thing to note about Pakistan, is that I think Mohiba noted this right at the outset, that the way in which Pakistan works is accountability, and it can be death, as happened with Zulfikar Ali Bhutto, or his daughter Benazir. It can be exile. It can be, there's a spectrum of what can happen to you as far as, but that is the military hanging you out to dry after having you first put you into power and then ripping you down. And that's what's happening to Imran Khan now. The real question is, when will there ever be accountability for people in uniform? And that's why I think there is a bit of both sensation, but also, from our perspective, a little bit of like skepticism about the way in which the DSA IC has been singled out. So this is a way of saying that there's one bad apple in a very good institution, but the institution is still, as it always has been, incorruptible. So accountability is a sham slogan in Pakistan. It always has been, just like corruption is a sham slogan, just like, frankly, any such word that is not ripped, shorn of its liberal sort of camouflage and imbued with content which is both classed and, in particular cases like in Pakistan, is colored khaki, or gendered or ethnicized. So unfortunately, we don't really have any history of sort of even nominally electoral processes. Having said that, I will say, like, what happened in the election, 8th of February, like, yes, they cobbled together a regime with the People's Party and the Noon League, but it's notable that a lot of people came out and voted for the PTI almost as a rebellion, almost as sort of like, we know now what the real deal is. We're not going to be able to stop you from manipulating this outcome, but on this day, we can go out and perhaps do this. And that is, I think there's something to be said for that. Now, whether or not we have the capacity on the left to be able to, as Zahid pointed out, sort of to create a project that can win people over. And mind you, we have a lot of history against us, okay? This is a country where using the term communist or socialist, it's not like India, right, where communism was mainstreamed, there are parliamentary communist parties. This is a country where, we had the global jihad centered. And, to be on the left, especially from the late 70s onwards, was to be criminalized just by definition. So we have a hard task, but accountability is not something that any of us are willing to get behind, because the way in which that term is weaponized. And I think the real challenge for us, and the good news is that if a wide cross section of people are now calling out the military, at least in some sense, in the ways that only very few of us did in the past, right? So that says that there's some opening, but deepening that and creating some sense that accountability in any case is not just about one bad apple. It's about, structural sort of forces. I think that would be, in a sense, our challenge.
Yeah,
So, sorry, Zahid, go ahead.
accountability. Yeah, accountability has always been used in Pakistan to crack down on political opponents, on civilian political leadership, whether it's mainstream political parties, liberal political parties, or left-wing political parties, or student organizations, or people who are fighting against military occupations and military accesses in Pakistan's peripheries, be it Gilgit-Baltistan, Kashmir, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Sindh, Balochistan. So accountability, the mechanism that Imran Khan was trying to introduce of accountability was also a very selective kind of accountability, where all those who came into PTI or who supported PTI through the state structures were one of the most honest, clean people in Pakistan. But all others who are outside this umbrella or this structure of PTI and support system within Pakistani state, they are corrupt, they are a threat to national security, and they should be hanged. That's the kind of accountability that Imran Khan was aiming for. But as Comrade Asim said, with this February 8 elections, people asserted themselves. There was no political symbol for PTI. There were different political symbols assigned to each candidate. They weren't allowed to do any kind of election campaign. But there was a deep resentment in Pakistani young population generally against the excesses of military and the way in which Imran Khan's government was ousted. And people just asserted their resentment through ballot paper that day. And which means in the past, there has always been a a section of Pakistani society which were vehemently supporter of military as an institution. They thought it is a symbol of patriotism to support your armed forces, and others are traitors who are criticizing Pakistan Army. But with this whole no confidence motion and the things that happened after that in the last 2 years, and then the February 8 elections, for the first time, I think in Pakistan, there is no popular constituency for the military establishment in Pakistan. They are now relying on technocrats and their media persons and their persons in the judiciary, but they don't have a popular constituency in Punjab or KP or Sindh or Balochistan or in any other part of the country. But we on the left are trying to channelize this deep resentment that a large portion of Pakistani population, which is 60 to 65% young population, which they have against the military and mainstream political parties, into some kind of substantive project, which can, number one, build a working class politics and working class power. Number two, which can also deal substantively with the question of nationalities or ethnicities in Pakistan, because right now there are two very big movements going on in KPK and Balochistan, which has nothing to do with PTI or its whole anti-establishment politics. Their politics goes much older. There is a whole history of peripheral movements, national liberation movements within Pakistan, and PTM, which is Pashtun Tahaffuz movement, and then which is in KPK. And then there is a Baloch Yakjahti, Baloch Solidarity March going on in different cities of Balochistan. So on the one hand, this is a constituency which we as left parties are trying to not only show solidarity with them, but also trying to work with these movements to build a larger project. And then there is this young population, which is huge in numbers in Pakistan. And I think if we are able to build some kind of national project along these lines, we will be able to counter this popular rhetoric, right-wing rhetoric of PTI in the coming 10 to 15 years.
Yeah, I think I don't have a lot to add, but I think that generally, as Asim and Zahid said, the structural, like political accountability has always worked in the favor of the military and has just like went on to weaken the civilian politics in Pakistan. So no faith in that. But while we talk about the people's accountability, I think that that has I would say qualitatively changed in the last couple of years, because I believe that even like when we look at like on a very small level, like in our households, it was also really difficult to talk about anything that was anti-military because that populism was on the rise. While right now, the populism of Imran Khan is so much that you have the space now to talk about the military and the anti-military sentiment. So that's what we are trying to focus on and trying to build up power there, that is something that we can work in our favor now, that there is space that has come out of the people's accountability. So yeah.
Right, great. So I wanted to move on to basically the questions of economics and that the rising right-wing threat. How would you describe the current economic instability, the way, how does it manifest itself right now in people's everyday lives, and how would you say people as a whole are reacting to that?
In outrageous sort of essentially just regressive taxation regime, because the state has no money and it needs to pay back $70 billion in the next 3 years to largely to all sorts of donors, multilaterals, bilaterals, a lot of private commercial debt. It's an astonishing debt profile if you look into it. And the military doesn't tax itself. It's the biggest landlord, it's the biggest industrialist, it's the biggest everything. The political elite doesn't tax itself, whether it's their agricultural lands, whether it's their rice and sugar mills, whether it's the big hoarders and traders with contraband. And so basically what's happened this last 2 or 3 months is they've levied something like a 35% tax on electricity and gas bills. So there's been this outrageous situation where you have people getting, running one fridge, one fan, and one bulb in the height of summer, and they're getting bills like 40, 50,000 rupees a month, which is in most cases working class households the equivalent of their entire monthly income, if not more. And this is mainstream Pakistan. This is not Balochistan or parts of KP or parts of Sindh where people are on the peripheries are having their resources pillaged. Zaid's, I believe, PhD project is in Thar, where you have this huge coal deposit, which is being sold as this massive development bonanza, and we will not have to import coal anymore. But the people of Thar don't have water to drink. So these are old stories, and they're just becoming worse. They're intensifying. So this economic and social crisis, it's a social and economic crisis, and it's manifest in the fact that probably once you find some meaningful statistics, you'll find that Pakistan has the highest emigration rates in the world, right? So the number of young people who by hook or crook are trying to leave, if they can, no matter how, they smuggle themselves out of the country through human smugglers. They get on boats. You'll remember, some of your listeners will remember about a year ago, there's this horrific incident off of the coast of Greece where 80 Pakistanis just drowned in a boat. And some of these people are not like, hand to mouth. We're talking about educated segments also trying to get out. So it's an intensifying sort of class war. And I see no end to it. I don't see, this is not a ruling class that has the ability or the vision or the foresight to be able to plan a durable project. This is a ruling class at war with itself, and not to mention with the people. And so these crises will intensify dramatically, I think, and that then will translate into repression, because these spontaneous movements, especially in the peripheries, will continue to emerge. So that's sort of the cycle that we see playing out time and again.
All right. So how would you say, like, you talked about how the right, obviously, especially with Imran Khan and PTI, has really kind of their message has resonated with the public in general, but in regards to this rising economic like uncertainty, how would you say the right and the left are responding, and what is in what is the reaction, the popular reaction to both of those responses, and if like the differences that there might be, why would you say they exist?
I mean, people who are working in different left political parties, we are now trying to rebuild some kind of national project or a working class power. But the economic situation right now is really bad in Pakistan. But we also think, and it's just our opinion as HKP, others might differ from it, that if Imran Khan is in opposition, it is much harder for the left to do any kind of politics because they are in 24/7 news cycle, in any kind of discussions, all of these things. So we think in order to debunk this myth of right-wing populism, PTI actually needs to come into government for 2, 3, 4 more years in order for people to see how their policies are mere words. All of their slogans are just hollow slogans. There is no substance or content in it. And in that time period, we have different strategies that maybe we can discuss in our next questions, which are specifically addressed to left political parties in Pakistan. In that time period, we can actually try to build some kind of alternative power in which we can not only attract young people, but also there is a ongoing wave of, I would call, proletarianization in Pakistan, where lower middle class people are also being pushed into further poverty because there are huge taxes on salaries also. So right now, the most resentful class in Pakistan, other than the people in peripheries who are struggling for their national and political rights, is the salaried class. Because if you are earning 50,000 or 60,000 a month, you'll only get 35 or 40,000. And then there are electricity prices. Then you also have to pay rent. You also have to pay for your children's school fees. All of these things are accumulating into a very different kind of middle class politics. And it will be a chance for parties on the left not only mobilize workers who are in the factories and young people who don't see any kind of future in Pakistan and people who are struggling in the peripheries, but we can also align with other popular classes like lower middle class and other classes who are being affected through this economic meltdown that Pakistan is going through. This current military leadership or political leadership or PTI leadership, they don't have any plan, as Comrade Asim said. They only operate on month-to-month basis. They are literally, after the last budget, they come on TV every month and they say to the nation that for next month we have this loans coming up. This nation has made pledges, IMF had made pledges, China is going to invest in Pakistan. So they're just waiting on loans from different countries to make the budget for the next 2, 3, 4 months. So if PTI comes into power and they disappoint people once again, as they did in 2018 to 2022 period, in that time period, I think we will have actual space to build an alternative left project in Pakistan.
And I will also add here, like, I believe that the far right, like the TLP, the Tehreek-e-Labbaik, Pakistan Party, the Islamic parties have also been trying to engage with the kind of economic instability that is there. But then again, like I mentioned before, I think that the problem is that they give like very simplistic solutions to really complicated issues, and they're not able to assess the issues themselves, and they're giving solutions like, end corruption, or blasphemy is the issue, and do not have like an economic plan to how to deal with this, while the left is trying to focus on having like an economic plan to for how to bring like Pakistan out of the economic instability that is there, and also try to base build and have this like, movement on the ground with the workers, so that we can like with them assess like what actually are the issues that are bringing in this like this huge instability, the economic instability that is there. So we are hoping on like this base building that we're doing on the ground with the workers to have like a more I think have more impact and more connection than what the far right in opposition is also doing. So yeah.
And so what are the solutions to fight this economic uncertainty, as well as like what are the solutions to fighting that right-wing encroachment in the public sphere in your minds, or maybe in the minds of your parties?
Yeah, if you mean in terms of like how do we puncture the right's not monopoly but dominance of the public sphere and sort of the projection of itself as the answer, I mean that's just old-fashioned organizing work, and being in the right place at the right time, as I had noted, that may happen if and when a party like the PTI comes back into power. It's clear that this is they are also part of the same system. But insofar as the actual sort of outlining some meaningful substantive policy solutions, I think we do that, and we have been doing that for a long time. Among other things, I think we talk about nothing that's rocket science. We talk about, in a sense, very classic redistributive policy, which is really not in any debate, in any sort of policy regime debate, that just doesn't happen. It's about tinkering with the system. Which finance minister listened to how much of the IMF's sort of conditionality pitches? And we talk about whether it be land reform or whether it be complete overhaul of the taxation regime and the progressive taxation regime. Frankly, I think that there's a case to be made for us to be quite aggressive about calling for outright sort of essentially nationalization, not just of industry or particular kinds of it. For instance, in the military's case, the Pakistani military has a vast corporate empire, and so one of the things that I think we could and we have called for consistently, and it's a good thing that now at least the criticism of the military, as all of us have noted, is now spreading further and wider. But that needs to now extend to a demand for the military's corporate assets, its land grabbing, its various sort of welfare sort of scams to be essentially brought into, or to be taken back into the public right now. They claim to be the country's most patriotic institution, claim to the public welfare, but really it's a big, as I said, khaki colored gangster regime. And I think these are the kinds of redistributive and aggressive redistributive policies that demand being called for. And then there's sort of broader debates about geopolitics and shifting away from the imperialist sphere of influence. And there's a lot of debate on the left about whether China offers that, and whether Moiba mentioned the CPEC projects and the kinds of debt that are associated with that, and how does that come? There's a global, of course, debate on the left about that. So there's a number of different, I think, very informed discussions that the left has led and does lead, and I think leads despite our ability to organize effectively enough on the ground to be a meaningful alternative at the present time. And I think leveraging that intellectual and sort of, in a sense, meaningful, substantive, ideological alternative with sort of that young population to try and win more people over into our organizing ranks. I think that is our challenge.
No, I also agree. There are 3, 4, 5 things which are broad agendas, but we need that in order to build, in order to move towards some kind of socialist Pakistan. If we ever build a national project in Pakistan, number one is we need land reforms, definitely. There is a huge inequality between land distribution in Pakistan. In different provinces, there are different dynamics, but we need land reforms, then nationalization also, and then we also need debt cancellation. Since the 80s, Pakistan has been going through different structural adjustment programs, and it has wrecked Pakistan's economy, and military has been part and parcel of this whole IMF deal making and war on terror and all of these things. So we need debt cancellation also because of this whole climate catastrophe. Pakistan hasn't even contributed its quota into carbon emissions. There are national quotas for every country that this is the quota you can emit to this limit, and after this limit, you will be exceeding the carbon emission quota. Pakistan hasn't even done that, and we are the fifth most vulnerable country in the world, which is suffering from climate catastrophes and which will suffer more in the coming years or months through climate catastrophes. So debt cancellation is also important in order to intervene in this reparations and loss and damage debate also. And then we also think it's a wish and it's a thing for the future to discuss. Maybe we can learn from other countries in the global south or other countries who have escaped shock therapies or structural adjustment programs. Maybe we also, if we are able to build a left-wing project in Pakistan, maybe we also need to de-link from rest of the world for some time in order to build our food security. There is excessive malnourishment going on in Pakistan right now. So in order to build our food security, in order to rebuild our economy, in order to nationalize our industries, we, number one, not only have to move away from the American imperialist camp, we also have to de-link from the global world in order to build our own sovereignty and our own investments and our own agriculture and our own industries. So this is a broader kind of agenda that we wish to implement. But right now, for the next 5, 6, 10 years, our focus is to build an alternative mass organization, left-wing, socialist, communist mass-wing organization, which has its roots in the working class, in the lower middle classes, in youth on campuses, and also in the movements for national liberation and political and national rights that are going on in the peripheries.
And just to add, I think that all of this is the way forward, the steps that have been highlighted by Asim and Zahid. But I think that the initial part right now for the left would be to build a base in the working class, because the working class has been taken advantage of by all of the groups that come into power by like these false promises that they make or these like really grand agendas that they bring. But we need to build a base within them so that there is popularity of our narrative and our ideology as well, and the working class is not taken advantage of as it is by the people who come into power all the time. So yeah, the first part for me would be to build a strong base so that whenever a rupture happens or a revolutionary situation happens, we do have a base that can take advantage of the situation.
Yeah, so I wanted to move on to some questions about the rising discontent in those peripheries that we've mentioned. Could you would like for you to speak to the rising discontent in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, Balochistan, and Balochistan, and what do you feel is causing that at the moment?
And mind you, rising is a relative term. I mean, Balochistan has experienced 5 insurgencies since 1948, and it goes, particularly Balochistan, goes in cycles. So we are at the peak of a cycle where you have, again, a very young, relatively educated leadership, and for the first time ever, women-led movement. It's quite unprecedented. So it's not just a national movement. I urge all of your listeners to look it up. It's called the Balochi Committee, and it's led by young medical doctors, and in fact, more to the point, it's led by women whose fathers, brothers were abducted, many of them killed, some of them forever disappeared. It's an epidemic in Pakistan, what is called enforced disappearances. It's like Argentina in the 1980s. We've just heard about Bangladesh, that there was a plethora of disappearances in the last 10, 12 years. These are, state military establishments on speed with no accountability, who can, in the name of national security, get away with bloody murder. Of course, we have the world's #1 agency called the Central Intelligence Agency, who's been doing it for the best part of 100 years with no accountability. RAW does it, the ISI does it, they all do it. And Balochistan and Baloch youth are calling it out. Like Zahid mentioned, the PTM, like Pashtun youth called out, have been calling out for the last 5, 6 years as well, under the backdrop of the war on terror. But these movements, I mean, it's important to bear in mind that these movements are in a current iteration. Pakistan is, I would argue, amongst the most, complex national questions in any post-colonial state, right? Because it's other than Israel, is the only country in the world that attributes the membership of the political community to your religious identity, to being a Muslim. And it is also in Pakistan that we saw a majority secede from a minority, which has never happened anywhere else in the world, which is how East Pakistan became Bangladesh. So this is a vexed problem, a vexed fundamental crisis. And I think, actually, if you ask me, over 25 years of political organizing, it is the single biggest challenge we face, to come up with a countrywide project where you can bring together the ethnic peripheries and mainland Pakistan's working population. It's always been a challenge, continues to be today. But as Zahid notes, we have close working relationships with these young leaders of the Baloch and Pashtun movements. We associated with people in the Sindhi national movement in Gilgit-Baltistan. We have a vibrant party in Gilgit-Baltistan. One of our main party leaders was in jail, Baba Jan, for 9 years, and is a renowned public figure there. Has run for election a couple of times. So that's what we can try and do. We still require a mass base in mainstream Pakistan to be able to create sort of that equal relationship across all of these national groups, and to project a new project, which is not about Islam and Urdu, but is about the multiplicity of identities, in which you can really talk meaningfully about a federation or even a confederation. Well, I'm in favor of a South Asian confederation, because all of it was not unified, but one, sort of broad spectrum of peoples and languages and religions, until the British came and created the mess that we have inherited.
Yeah, I agree. I just wanted to add one point. The fight in the peripheries now increasingly is also about a fight about resources and land and environment. In Gilgit-Baltistan recently, they almost gave the whole agricultural or tourist land of Gilgit-Baltistan to army. They made this new company called Green Tourism Company, and they have handed over most of the Gilgit-Baltistan land to Pakistan Army. The same thing is happening in Sindh. There is the last border district with India's Rajasthan province is Nangar Parkar. There is a mountain range there, which they call Karunjar mountain range, and the army is involved in mining granite from those mountains, and those mountains also hold very cultural and religious value for the Sindhi people. So what I'm trying to say is that maybe this time we'll have a bigger chance of building a national project with the involvement of these movements, because they are increasingly also articulating their national and political grievances in the language of climate justice or environment or control over resources or control over land. So the big question for these movements, and most of young people are involved in these movements, is who will own the land, who will decide how local resources are being used. And so this is the kind of language they are adopting. So there is a close link in peripheral movements of Pakistan between climate justice and national liberation or ethnic or political rights right now. So I think the left can also intervene in this new articulation of these movements and build. We already have strong solidarities with all of these movements which are going on in the peripheries. But right now, I think we can build more deeper solidarities and concrete networks with these movements.
And I would say that like Asim said, that this has been going on for a long time now. The movements are making those wider connections right now, and then the movements are also getting, I think that they're mobilizing on such a great level, because it's kind of like their lands are occupied, they have their resources are occupied, they have no control over their own resources, over their own land, and over their own politics. Like, the military has been so heavily involved in all of these peripheral regions that they are the ones that end up like installing these puppet leadership in all of these areas, and so they do not also have a political voice. And so the only way that the voice comes out is through this mass organizing. And now that mass organizing, because of like also the economic instability, just imagine, because the economic instability is so much in the center, what would be the case in the peripheries? The peripheries have it so much worse, and so the peripheries are feeling the impacts much more than the center has been, and the center is doing so much worse. So that's why I think that coupled with the historic injustices that have happened to them, the historic occupying of their land and resources, coupled with the economic instability that is hitting them hard. And so that's why I think that there is this rise in the anger towards the state.
Yeah. So, could you give us a quick breakdown of the Taliban in the region, the role Pakistan has played in their proliferation, and how that has led to the current situation with the TTP, and what threat the Afghan Taliban and TTP pose to the state of Pakistan? Like, how is the rise of the Taliban and TTP changing the political calculus in the Pakistani landscape?
Yeah, again, it's a much longer historical story than just the current moment. Again, if you go back to what I said earlier, Pakistan has always politicized religion. The state has always politicized religion, and long before, in fact, it's a great misnomer amongst many, even well-informed historians, that somehow the jihad project started in Afghanistan after the PDPA invited the Soviets in. That's not true. The jihad project started in 1972, even when Zahir Shah was king of Afghanistan. And so essentially, Afghanistan has always been viewed by Pakistan as a potential fifth province, well, at least after East Pakistan seceded. And they've always wanted what they call strategic depth. Pakistan, if you look at a map, is quite narrow in terms of its width. And so there's this notion that the arch enemy, India, if it ever attacks, we want to have depth to be able to compete, or to be able to plan our defense. And Afghanistan or a friendly government in Kabul has always been the project. And it's been a project for the best part of 50 years. And the Taliban are simply the latest iteration of the various sort of militant groups that have been sponsored by or backed by Pakistan since the early 70s. Now, having said that, of course, it's again a vexed question, right? This is not a simple friend-enemy distinction, as is the case in politics. It's also true that both before 1977 and then most notably, I think, between 2002 and 2022, the 20-year occupation of Afghanistan, the pro-American regime, essentially was locked into certain urban spaces, lost large parts of southern and eastern Afghanistan, which are the Pashtun majority regions, to the Taliban. The Taliban did, for whether through Pakistan support or otherwise, establish itself as a sort of parallel regime. So it's a very complex story. And since 2022, when the Americans left, which, by the way, is really a case of the Americans handing over Afghanistan back to the Taliban. What's happened is, as you rightly point out, that the border districts, what are called the tribal districts in Pakistan, have experienced a sort of, in a sense, strengthening of what is called the Tehreek-e-Taliban in Pakistan. So that the Afghan Taliban sort of brethren, which is shock horror. I mean, we knew this was going to happen, but of course, at the time, Imran Khan's regime and his DGISI, who's just been hung out to dry, were celebrating this as some great victory. And it was bound to happen, and it has happened. And so, these are things that we've been talking about. At least I remember have been talking about when I was, in the late 90s and early 2000s when Afghanistan was being invaded, that this is going to be a mess that is going to create both the social conditions for the religious right to thrive, and eventually the imperialist war is going to end, and it's going to be the religious right that's back sort of in the saddle. And that's what's happened. And in very similar ways, groups like the PTM, secular Pashtun youth, who've been calling out not only the Taliban, but also the Pakistani state and imperialism, are constantly under the cosh. Mohsin Dawar and Ali Wazir both were MNAs for 4 years, and they've been shot at, they've been jailed, because they speak about this three-headed monster. They don't just try and pick sides. And I think that's what a meaningful left project does. It doesn't seek an easy sort of friend-enemy distinction necessarily, but looks at the complexity of the problem and recognizes that, again, these are long-term projects that we need to build to be able to displace this, as I said, three-headed monster.
All right. So I guess I wanted to move on to the kind of the way forward for the left. And so I was wondering what your thoughts were on how is the left adapting its analysis to the current movement as things are changing, and what is the theory of the left in addressing these situations?
I mean, as we discussed earlier, we are right now if I'm talking about Haqooq-e-Khalq Party, we are right now at the beginning of building an incredible and organized workers movement. Firstly, in parts of Punjab, and also where there are no factories in cities of Punjab, we are also trying to build peasant committees. So the first phase in the theory of change is to build an alternative working class and popular classes power, and which is not only restricted to just one province, which is a national project of left in Pakistan. And as we discussed earlier, in mainland, in popular vocabulary, what we called mainland Pakistan, we can actually build a very organized, disciplined, and militant workers movement and peasants movement in parts of Punjab, in parts of Sindh, and also in some parts of Khyber Pakhtunkhwa. And with that, we are also trying to we already had a very big student movement, youth movement in Pakistan in 2019, and we have some victories on our sides also. And student unions were banned in Pakistan in 1984, but in 2019, there were protests all over Pakistan in more than 50 cities, and the government, for the first time after 2-3 decades, admitted that there should be student unions. And now the only hurdle is that we have to mobilize the students again to move towards elections in the campuses. So our goal is to build a youth and workers and peasants power in mainland Pakistan, and then also to deepen our solidarities and networks with the peripheral movements that are going on in Khyber Pakhtunkhwa, in Sindh, in Gilgit-Baltistan or Balochistan. And we are also trying to start this new discussion of forming a mass left party or a popular front or a united front, which can be able to build this kind of politics right now in Pakistan.
Yeah, I don't know if Mohiba wants to come in, but I would simply add, well, first of all, I think the long story short, which is I think partly what you guys at DSA are helping us do by bringing us together, is for all of us to come together. So that's definitely something Zaid said this earlier, and I believe that is the way forward first and foremost. But I would also add, I think that there is our theory of change must also, I've written a book about this recently, must also um, contend with and think about the digital as which is sort of really, we talked about the PTI and young people and digital spaces as being a huge part of what they have done, partly why the military is struggling to rein them in, because they may not have bases on the ground, but they are able to mobilize in digital spaces in ways that are still, Pakistan has basically banned Twitter. And there's been a massive internet slowdown over the last 5 days, which is wrecking the economy. But the state is so petrified of the kinds of dissent that it encounters in digital spaces. But that's not to romanticize the digital space. I think to think about platforms and to think about how that is how big capital operates, I think as a vision for the future, given that we work with young people and that we target young people and that we want young people to come over to our side, I think our theory of change must contend with what that looks like. I don't have answers. I think these are answers for us to come up with collectively and to collaborate on. And yeah, I totally think that the first and foremost thing is to have a significant enough social base on the ground. And I think if we close ranks and we build one organization, we jump a lot of steps in that direction of then also being able to theorize the digital in ways that I think are both critical and enable our project.
Yeah, and I would also just add, like, not to romanticize the digital space, but that gives us a lot of opportunities as well as the left. We've also been like working to create like um, a, s- a social space for the left to amplify the left's point of view. And so we've at HKP also developed like a professional social media team that can put forth like our perspective to the masses. And just in that as well, would want to add that we are also trying to build like connections between the working classes in Pakistan and like elsewhere as well. So for example, I'm working with the Pakistani working class in New York City, so having like those connections, because our union density in Pakistan is less than 1%, and we want people to have the experience of what working class leadership looks like. And so there are a lot of lessons to exchange in both the different kinds of work that the working class does in, like, different spaces. And the digital space gives us that platform, it gives us that space. And so to utilize that at its best, that's also a strategy for now.
Right. So what work are each of your parties more heavily involved in, and what are the more specific ways that the various left forces have been collaborating on the way forward?
I think if we're honest, the left has still, like, in terms of the left organizations that are represented here, and I think I would say that's the case in general across the board, and I say the left as a spectrum. Um, we are largely based in urban centers, like in Lahore and Karachi and Islamabad, and some of our more effective work has been around neighborhoods. We work a lot on housing and evictions, and HKP has done a lot of great work over the last few years around sanitation, around basic public services. We also have, I talked about, there's some, popular bases in places like Gilgit-Baltistan. We have sort of good organization sort of presence in parts of Sindh or parts of KP. But the truth is that I wouldn't say that we have sort of the kind of countrywide sort of, in terms of concrete presence, that we need. And that, I think, is why I think the discussion is, well, we close ranks. That means that we have, we multiply what we do have with each other's efforts. And I think that's one big sort of discussion that is starting or has been had for a while. I think has been held up by perhaps somewhat more prosaic questions of ideology, or frankly, just the kinds of sectarianism which the left seems to specialize. I mean, the right does a lot of sectarianism too, but it doesn't stop it from closing ranks and coming to power. And I think that's a lesson for us So that's one thing. And I think the other thing is also to, I think one of the things that I would certainly like us to do more, in the 20th century, I think the left was the preeminent revolutionary project amongst ordinary people in the world because it had a vision of the future. Even if that was sort of like someplace, in Soviet Russia or in China, it was still something to sort of say, okay, this is what we want to do. We want to create a worker state. And that idea of the future, and I think Zaid has touched on it a little bit, I think now must be heavily informed by the fundamental question of ecology, right? And nature. And I think we can do that in ways that nobody else would even try. And I think that is something that we can and we must do, because simply saying we are against X, Y, and Z is not sufficient condition to bring people together to build something. And I think that would be our next step in terms of articulating a futuristic vision, which then gives hope to young people and makes them want to stop trying to get on a boat and leave for anything that is slightly greener pasture. Otherwise, we'll be doing a lot of fighting and a lot of resistance. But I do think that is our next step, to have a very coherent and appealing vision of the future, which is hopeful and which does hearken to a different socio-economic order entirely, and a way of being, and a way of being individually, and a way of being collectively. And I think that's terribly absent, probably in left circles all over the world, but Pakistan probably stands out for me, given my experience.
Yeah, speaking for HKP, we have been involved in some really good organizing with industrial workers in Punjab specifically, and we have had some victories also. We have formed some unions in different industrial factories in Lahore, Gujranwala, Faisalabad, and we have also did campaign with workers of these factories on minimum wages, social security, EOBI. So these are some of the current campaigns that we are involved in, and we are hoping that with this momentum that is going on right now in the labor industrial workers organization, we will be able to have a very good base with the factory workers in Punjab in the coming in a coming year or so. And then we are also forming peasant committees in different parts of Punjab, because as we talked earlier, there is a big question of agriculture also, which is important for Pakistan historically, but for the current moment, due to this whole climate change and climate catastrophe, it is also, the agriculture is again becoming important, specifically for the countries in the global south. As for the future model, if I may say, maybe we can look at current day China and as a symbol of hope, or a symbol of a model of a socialist or a communist model. I mean, they have did some incredible things. They have pushed millions of people out of poverty in the last 2 decades. They have also stood firmly on their sovereignty. They have built their own kind of national economy on the basis of some socialist struggle, social revolutions that happened in the 60s and 70s, on the basis of land reforms, on the basis of their policy of delinking, on the basis of prioritizing their own population's needs rather than the needs of imperialist blocs, or being involved in these kind of global maneuverings. So I think as far as internal and national economy is concerned, and as far as the current situation, the current global geopolitical situation is concerned, specifically the ongoing genocide in Palestine, and how there was a Beijing declaration recently, 2 weeks ago or 3 weeks ago. I think China can be a model of hope, specifically for the countries of global south, and specifically for those countries whose large part of population is still associated with agriculture. They don't have any kind of industrialization. There are huge portions of population who are in poverty, and then also the kind of international interventions that we have experienced. So this can be a model of hope and way forward to look for left in Pakistan.
All right, so one last question before we move on to the Q&A section. written down here. Pakistan almost had a socialist revolution in 1971, which devolved into a populist left government. What does a path to socialism look like in Pakistan now, and is it closed? If not, how do we get there?
I think, as we've mentioned before as well, the situation, because if you do not have like a base within the working class, if there isn't a model that they know that they can aspire to, then it's very easy that if a revolutionary situation happens like that has recently happened in Bangladesh, for the powerful forces to take advantage of that position. And when you're not ready, you're not able to take advantage of that situation. And so that's why we've like laid down that model of like increasing the union density, working with like, the working class in different parts of Pakistan, making sure that there is solidarity within like the larger left, and all of those things coming together so that whenever such a situation occurs again, you are able to be like, you have like grounded footing and you're able to take advantage of that. So I think that that generally is how I see us moving forward, if such a situation ever happens. If anybody else wants to add on to that.
Yeah, I mean, it's another question of whether we were on the cusp of a socialist revolution in 1971, but certainly it is true that sort of those forces, as is the case, Moyeba just mentioned Bangladesh, anywhere, politics is a contingent question, especially in such situations of upheaval. It's certainly a situation of upheaval in Pakistan right now, but we are not, I think, on the cusp of being able to take state power out of it. I think if I had to use a different sort of theoretical architecture to think through this, for me, I think we're still in a war of position stage, rather than being able to inflict a war of maneuver where we can, take the decisive step. I don't think that means it's an endless war of position. It's not one of those reformist sort of the way Euro-communists tend to do, where it's just a forever and after, and the commodity form is colonized us all no matter what we do. But at the same time, I think that there is certainly, as I mentioned earlier, sort of like we have to balance sort of a pessimism, intellectual pessimism of where we are. As I talked about climate, I mean, it's shocking to me that it's only 2 years ago that a third of the country was underwater, and sort of basically nobody really talks about this anymore. And they'll only talk about it again when it happens in a similar scale of a climate breakdown event happens. So we are facing a lot of hard times to come. And I think the challenge for us is to move away, as both Zaid and Moeba have been saying, sort of try and focus less on sort of the reacting to everyday events, because there's so many events and it's so incessant and it's such a state of perpetual crisis, economic, state repression, disappearances. There's a sexual apartheid and violence crisis in our country, which we haven't had an opportunity to talk about today, which is endemic in households and religious seminaries. I mean, it's you name it. So it's and away from that sort of reacting to everyday events and being able to say, okay, well, we have a project. And I think that's hard. It's not an easy thing to do, because politics also demands that you respond to everyday events, right? It demands that you are able to have an opinion, that you show yourself when the going gets tough. And you can't just be like, well, no, I'm building a project, I'll see you in a few years, right? So I think that these are challenges. And again, I think one of the things I'm grateful to you guys at DSA for is to give us an opportunity to sort of look at one another from across that. We know each other very well, but to be able to say publicly, like, well, we recognize that we need one another, right? None of us is able to do this on our own. I mean, I think it's folly to have sort of a very grandiose sort of self-projection that we will do this and we will do that. I think some intellectual pessimism is important to be able to generate what Gramsci would call an optimism of the will. And that means sort of a war of position strategy that we share. We talk about working class base. We talk about the rural urban uneven development. We talk about the peripheries and the center. We talk about gender. We talk about ecology. There's so much to talk about. We talk about imperialism, and we talk about where we have differences. I mean, it's okay to have differences without saying, well, we can never work with each other. I think that's also something that we have to be able to do. And that, I think, will help us forward and be able to then maybe, as I say, to win over that cross section of young people that we need to build this project.
No, I agree what Comrade Asim said, but I'll add one more thing. The lesson that we can learn from 68, 69 movement, whether we call it a revolutionary movement, it was a very militant mass movement in Pakistan in 68, 69. But then what happened was there was no organization of that movement who can sustain that momentum of the movement and then build an alternative power. Unfortunately, the organization that represented that movement stabbed it back. The Pakistan, I'm talking about Pakistan People's Party. So the lesson that we can learn from 68, 69 movement, or from the movement of Bangladesh, or from Arab Spring, or from Occupy Wall Street, all of these movement is that you not only need a mass disciplined working class left-wing organization, which we call party, but you also need a politically educated left-wing political party. Because if you don't have a theoretical orientation, a communist socialist theoretical orientation, which is anti-imperialist, which believes on building a real working class power, which believes on this question of ecology, which believes on the question of national liberation and the rights of ethnicities. If we are able to build this kind of mass organization, left-wing mass organization in Pakistan, and we also make some kind of unholy alliances with other popular classes strategically in Pakistan, I think there is a huge chance that we can actually grab state power in the near future. So I think I agree we need to close rank. We can move towards a united popular front, or we can move towards one party. And I'm glad that we have started this discussion here also, and we had these discussions in the recent past also.
Yeah, that's great to hear. So I'm gonna move on to the Q&A because we have some interesting questions. First one that I wanted to pass on was, what is the party's orientation and narrative toward, or I guess your party's orientation and narrative towards poor communities in Pakistan, and in what structural ways do your parties maintain connections with young and old poor Pakistanis?
Yeah, I would prefer more of like a class usage rather than poor. I mean, I think we work with working class communities. You know, some can be in rural communities, some can be urban communities. I can give you just the particular example of something that we've done over many years is work with what we call squatter settlements and against evictions, and around, you know, the questions of neighborhoods. And I think that is in our case, has been at least one important and successful method of creating a mass space, even if within certain pockets. You know, Zahid and Moiba have been talking about doing it at the point of production with increasing union density, and both in the formal and informal sector. We've had, again, maybe sporadic, but we've had successes. I, again, had a long experience working in Okada and in Khanewal, in parts of Punjab with a peasant movement, which is now 20 years old. So, I mean, we have had some successes. As I said earlier, they're in pockets. And so those are our experiences. And frankly, I would say only one thing. I think we would have many more such experiences if we had an organized, educated cadre of young people to go out and do this politics. I don't think it's rocket science what we need to do. I think what we lack is we have relatively few people doing the work of thousands, honestly, and everything from organizing on the ground to creating the intellectual output to you know, even the everyday mundane business of running our own organizations. So I think that we have had good successes. We continue to do whenever we put our minds and hearts to it. And I think I think sort of the breakthrough is, again, what we've talked about, this young demographic that is largely drawn to a populist right-wing narrative and deepening the political education of that demographic and trying to create a futuristic vision that they can buy into.
Right. Okay. Moheba, I know you have to get going in a few minutes, so I wanted to ask, I think, because you might have experience that would help answer this question, but how can those of us overseas support the leftist movement in Pakistan?
Yes, thank you for first of all hosting, and I have to unfortunately leave a little bit early, but yeah, so the HKP also has a network of people here, volunteers here in the US, and we have like separate groups, and we try to meet often, because of course for any kind of movement you need resources, and the first thing that the people overseas can help with is resources. That could be any kind of resources that they can help with. And so we have that network. We're trying to build that network more as long as we are here as like international students ourselves, me and Zahid. And we have like, because there is like a surge of like immigrants coming from Pakistan, we're trying to, increase that network as well, so that people who are coming outside of Pakistan because of like the situation in Pakistan do not come here like hopeless, and we have like this network where they can plug in, and we can envision like a future for Pakistan, and the left in Pakistan and the politics in Pakistan, and will continue to do so. So I would love to stay connected, and I can, like, whoever is interested, I would love to, exchange, contacts, and then we can stay in touch and talk more about that in here as well, in the belly of the beast.
Where could people follow you or connect with you, Moheba?
I can drop my email in the chat, and that's how we can stay connected. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Zahid and Asim, I'm not sure if you might want to take a stab at that question, or how you feel that maybe whether it's people who are in the Pakistani diaspora or even non-Pakistanis abroad, how they could help, or be a part of what you're trying to do here.
I mean, as Muhiba mentioned, the number one thing that we need from overseas communities is resources to build a mass organization, working class, or mass left-wing party in Pakistan. We actually need a lot of resources. And the one thing that helped BTI, besides military support, is the overseas support that they have gotten over the years. So we are trying to also build an alternative network of overseas Pakistanis or other left-wing political organizations or groups who can support a left-wing progressive communist socialist project in Pakistan. So resources, and then also propagating our message on international forums, and also making connections on international forums.
So you had both mentioned that HKP has done some union work. So one of the questions we have is, what is the strength of labor in Pakistan, and have there been any labor strikes in recent years?
Before that, I'll just be leaving now. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining, and thank you for the time. It was a lovely discussion. Thank you. Bye.
I mean, we are trying to rebuild a labor movement which solely focuses on industrial workers, and there hasn't been any general labor strike, but we have been able to with the help of workers, mobilize workers to do strikes in their individual factories. And that's how they have gotten minimum wages, social securities, EOBIs, and other such benefits that are their rights to get. And we have also been involved in unionizing in different factories in Punjab, and we are trying to replicate this model of organizing with the workers to all over Punjab in the coming 1 or 2 years. And the other thing that we are trying to do is to also do study circles and political education sessions with these workers, so that we are also we can also help them build working class leadership. There hasn't been a working class leader in Pakistan in like so many decades now. So we are also trying to revive this older history of bringing working class leaders into mass politics, into mainstream politics through the platform of Haqooq-e-Khalq Party or any other formation that we go into in the coming years. So this is our two-tier strategy in order to mobilize and organize industrial workers.
All right, great. Thank you. So we're just going to take two more questions because we do have limited time before we wrap up. Let's see what we can do. Hold on one second. So how do your parties approach the agrarian question in Pakistan? What are the trends in agriculture in the country, and how does this relate to the agitation we're seeing from these minority ethnic groups that you mentioned, such as the Balochis?
And the agrarian question is pretty acute. I mean, it's on the one hand, there's like mass financialization of land, and so you have like sub-agrarian peripheries are being just swallowed up by these massive real estate, by urban sprawl. On the other hand, you have, smallholders are being wiped out, are being basically pushed out of farming because, both agribusiness and middlemen and the cost of inputs, and then just sporadic every once in a while, these border closures, which also severely and contraband goods coming and going, agricultural goods coming and going. And then there's this traditional landed elite, which basically squeezes out, and the vast majority by the people living in rural Pakistan are landless, and are forced to go into non-agricultural occupations or work as agricultural wage laborers. About 35 million people who are landless. So I mean, agriculture features skewed land ownership, is completely based on old, obsolete models of colonial dam engineering, and now we don't even have often. I mean, so recently we had a wheat scandal where we had a bumper crop, but we were importing wheat at the same time because it suited, obviously these hoarders and profiteers. So agriculture and the agrarian question is like so many other things in Pakistan, is subject to structural crisis, especially in class terms and ecologically. And again, both whether it be questions of land rights, whether it be questions of access to basic food, whether it be questions about opposing commodification and the power of agribusiness. I mean, these are all both intellectual questions and, more importantly, political questions that, with the right sort of cadre and organizational base, we can go out into the villages and actually organize people around.
Yeah, I agree. And also with the question of land is increasingly becoming important in global South generally and in Pakistan also. And the most of the land that is being accumulated either for developmental projects or for these real estate projects is agricultural land in Pakistan. And then Comrade Asim just talked about the wheat scandal. We had bumper crop of wheat, but we also imported some wheat from other countries, and the farmer was unable to sell their wheat crop this year, and that has damaged the wheat farmers really. And then there are excessive taxation on fertilizers and all of these things, and then there is a whole issue of irrigation and water, which is affecting agriculture in Pakistan. So in order to build a left politics around agriculture and land, the number one agenda should be land reforms, equal redistribution of land. And then the other agenda should also be that you have to grow crops or food that you require for your local population's consumption. You don't have to sell your food or crops to other countries, and you first have to meet the necessities of your population through a just land reform policy, and then you will think about opening your agricultural markets to other countries.
Okay. Last question, because I think it could say a lot about maybe where South Asia is headed as a whole. But someone asked, how is the Bangladesh coup viewed amongst leftists in Pakistan? Does Pakistan play any role in it or in that situation? And would you say it was a loss for China, which days before had signed a pact with Sheikh Hasina?
I played a role in it because I certainly wasn't consulted. Look, I mean, it's an interesting one because, of course, in Pakistan, the question of Bangladesh strikes at the heart of Pakistani state nationalism. As I mentioned earlier, this is the seceding majority of the country, right? Who are also primarily Muslims. So it was really a huge dent in the Pakistani state nationalist ideology that all Muslims of South Asia were one and wanted to be together. And of course, the Bengalis didn't. They wanted out. So it's been very skewed. All of the discussion around Bangladesh and what's happened. Certainly, on the one hand, there's very little doubt that when push comes to shove, the outcome is that the right wing and the military has strengthened. But of course, like every other tragedy of the liberal center, even once center left, like the Awami League was, they created the conditions. Hasina created those conditions herself. And so we're in a cul-de-sac, right, where we don't have any mainstream party or player that represents the aspirations of the people. And can states, was China supporting the Awami League and is Pakistan supporting now the right wing that is taken over? Possibly. But for me, the bigger question is, how do we break out of this cycle? I mean, Zahid mentioned this earlier, right? We have these popular movements that come into existence because of organic crises, whether in the United States or in Bangladesh or in Pakistan or so many other parts of the world, but that because we don't have a project that can then take those movements forward and create some outcome which is an organized, conscious, this is what we want to replace this establishment with, inevitably then you see whether it be sort of shady geopolitics taking precedence, or just as bad, probably worse, the reactionary forces within those societies coming to the fore. And that's to say that it's still contingent. I don't believe that this mass uprising led by young people and students, which is a big thing for us in Pakistan because we don't have student unions, right? As I just mentioned, just to play them off as if they don't count, like they're not even part of what's going to happen moving forward. I think that's also something to be wary of. Not to say we should understate, what may be happening with regards to the geopolitical wrangling. But it's certainly true that the right wing and the military has benefited. And I think, the question then for these students and young people is how they can take back whatever it is that they wanted, and that will require organization, which is the same, in a sense, brings us back to where we started, is also what we require. If any such movement in Pakistan, which keep emerging, we've talked about some of them, are going to make a definitive dent, are going to cause a breakthrough rather than be in the sine curve of resistance and repression, which is what we are seeing in Pakistan and around the world, and Bangladesh included.
Yeah, I agree. I was attending a session earlier by Comrade Vijay Prashad and Comrade Amar Ali Jan, and they also discussed this issue of Bangladesh. And it was surprising for me to know that there was a genuine movement of students against quota system, and it's not a new movement. This issue has been there since the past so many years. But after toppling Hasina Wajid's government, all of the leadership has been to US Embassy a couple of times to decide about the next policies and governance system and all of these things. So it has certainly benefited not only right-wing and military, but also the US after Sheikh Hasina's government was toppled. The question again is, there are popular movements. There is no guarantee that those movements will represent the aspirations of a progressive or communist or socialist society or a right-wing fascist or authoritarian society. The question for us is, if there are these kind of movements in society, is there an organization capable of sustaining the momentum and aspirations of these movements, and also capable of taking state power rather than going to different embassies to decide their future.
Right. Well, I'm excited to see what you all can accomplish. So, for folks who would like to keep up with your individual work or your party's work, where could they follow you, find you, contact you?
Both of our parties have different social media platforms. We'll definitely share the links in the WhatsApp group that we have, and you can follow us there also.
Yeah,
All
and
right.
there's email. I've sent my email as well, so anybody who wants to reach out individually is free to do so.
Okay. And we can try and share those as well on our social medias if you don't have them on hand. As for everyone else, if you are in the US, please do consider joining DSA and our international committee. You can join us on online. We have a forum. We are also this will be put up on YouTube at DSA International Committee, which is also our handle on Instagram. On Twitter, it's a little more complicated. It's DSA_INTL_COMM. We really look forward to not only doing more discussions, more work with your parties, but also maybe throughout broader South Asia. And yeah, watch this space for sure. Thank you so much for your time. I know it's getting kind of late over there, so yeah, thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you so much for hosting us and providing us with this opportunity.
All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Bye-bye.